Welcome to Games in the Glade, a stress-free news and reviews podcast. I am your host, Tina. Today, in this episode, I'll be going over nearly every showcase that ran this summer, including some you may not have even known about. We'll start off with Best D&D Games' Indie 3, then discuss Devolver's offerings, and then I'll give you a taste of some of the more mainstream selections from the Xbox Showcase. Then I'll cover the Latin American Dev Showcase, women-led games, and then we'll hit up the Summer Games Fest. Finally, I'll respond to your answers to last episode's question about your favorite puzzle games or memorable puzzles from games you've enjoyed. And lastly, I'll give you my review of one of my new favorite games of all time now, The Case of the Golden Idol. It's that time of year when all the companies band together to overwhelm us with a bunch of announcements, but don't fret. I've watched every single announcement for you and I've picked out the highlights. Starting off, one of my favorite YouTubers, Best Indie Games, had an Indie 3 showcase just a little while ago, showing off some games that have been announced for 2024 and 2025. The first one that caught my eye was Castaway, a retro-inspired adventure in the style of Link's Awakening. You're a precious boy who has washed ashore a strange island teeming with monsters and puzzles. The game advertises itself as a bite-sized adventure, focusing on 3 dungeons. I should also mention that there seems to be RPG elements to Castaway, as the trailer features a level-up screen with 3 possible attributes to improve. This looks to be an interesting concept, executed well and succinctly. So if you're a fan of Link's Awakening or the Oracle games, check this one out when it releases in 2024. Next up, more fodder for retro fans. Beyond the Ice Palace 2 is a Metroidvania that leans more into the Castlevania side of things. With fluid animations and satisfying sound effects, Beyond the Ice Palace 2 comes across as a very visceral adventure. There seems to be an advanced level progression system in this game, featuring vitality, physical, power, gas, and rage. And the trailer shows off 2 unique boss battles, one against an executioner and another against a strange porcupine demon man. Beyond the Ice Palace 2 is coming out sometime this year. This year, as in so many years past, is loaded with Metroidvanias, so here comes another, Path of the Teal Lotus, which actually released this year, July 17th, and which many of you might have seen teasers for in the past year or so. Path of the Teal Lotus features mythological deities and demons from Japanese folklore and religions, providing an excellent background for the game's fast-paced movement and combat. This one looks a little like Ori and the Blind Forest to me in terms of traversal, with the protagonist shooting through waypoints to speed through maps. A host of delightful NPCs serve to guide or hinder you along the way. My favorite, showcased by the trailer, is a chef with kind of a Naruto spiral fish cake head. And it seems like your powers have some relation to the Dharma-san figurine. Based on the Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen Buddhism, a papier-mâché Dharma doll has no limbs, and rather than having painted in eyes, has 2 white blanks where eyes should be. The owner of a Dharma doll paints one eye of it when they set a goal they want to achieve, and then they fill in the other eye only when that goal is met, granting the doll partial sight in order to coax some luck from the doll to get the goal met so that true sight can be achieved. In Path of the Teal Lotus, your powers-up seem to be Dharma dolls inspired by the elements like fire and ice. Some are inspired by Japanese warriors like samurai and ninja, and others are inspired by items like bombs. But all the Dharma have only one eye painted. It's a clever detail that is just one part of the rich tapestry that Path of the Teal Lotus weaves. If you're a platforming action fan, check this one out. If fast-paced shooters are your thing and you just wish they had a roguelike element to it, you've got to give Mullet Mad Jack a try. It features hyper-saturated neon tones and in-your-face UI with combo counters and over-the-top kill animations. I'm not one for first-person games because they make me queasy, but I really do wish I could play Mullet Mad Jack just because of the style that's dripping from it. It released May 15th this year and has a demo available as of July 17th, so give it a look if you're even remotely into shooters or roguelikes. Next up, Faeland, a game which, by the looks of it, seems to be inspired by Zelda 2. Hunt animals, fight monsters, and brave difficult terrain in this adventure RPG platformer, which is already 6 months into early access. If you're yearning for rich 16-bit goodness, this game might be for you. And if you love unique puzzle games, ParaPerspective will pique your interest. In ParaPerspective, changing your perspective affects your ability to solve a puzzle. The best thing I can compare this game to is Superliminal, Viewfinder, and the Talos principle, but rather than be in first person, you rotate the minimalist puzzles in space and observe them through a third-person view. There's even a level editor, so this game has limitless potential to tickle your brain. There's no set date for ParaPerspective, but if you wishlist the game, you'll be notified when it releases. This next game gets my vote based on the title screen alone. KOOK is a first-person medieval horror shooter featuring a guy with funny glasses on the title screen. In it, you wield a crossbow and some strange time-stopping powers to battle eldritch evils in Asherian environments. It's not a game that I would play because, again, I can't play first-person games, but it does seem to have a fun sense of humor. Now, for a game I can play, there's My Familiar, a gritty, surreal RPG starring anthropomorphic beasts that walk the desolate streets of Wish City. The trailer for this one is so well done, with a catchy rap explaining the world of My Familiar set over turn-based battle footage. The game looks gorgeous so far. And though I don't know much about the story, I think My Familiar is going to be a runaway favorite when it releases in 2025. Fans of the Donkey Kong Country series will want to keep an eye out for Windswept, a precision platformer with pixel graphics starring an adorable duck and turtle combo that use their unique abilities to navigate the 40-plus levels of the game. And like Donkey Kong Country, you're accompanied by companions like a nautical captain dolphin, a zoomy dog, a bubble-shooting crab, and a clever chameleon who can turn you into a painting to hide your duo from enemies. Windswept looks like a great combination of fun and difficulty, so look forward to its release in 2025. Now for something a little different. Hermit and Pig is an adventure RPG starring, you guessed it, a hermit and a pig, who are hunting for mushrooms in the wilderness while trying to uncover a corporate plot. The art style is kind of like Mother 3 meets Dilbert, but in a way that's not derivative. And the battle involves directional command combos in order to attack. This looks like a fun game with a great message, so look forward to Hermit and Pig releasing sometime this year. If you're an Animal Crossing fan and you loved completing the museum, but you kind of wish you could play as a dinosaur instead of a boring old human, then Goodlands might be up your alley. In it, you play as a paleontologist who travels through the Goodlands, instead of the Badlands, to find fossils to fill a decrepit museum. This looks like a lovely adventure, so check it out later this year. This year's announcements had tons of RPGs, including Kingdoms of the Dump, which caught my eye thanks to the unique setting of a land made out of trash. Used tires, broken down appliances, and rusty nails are strewn through a beautiful overworld that scrolls like a classic SNES game across the screen as your hero, a trash can, ventures through the land to find the trash-picked king. And who better could make this game than two real-life janitors? I'm excited to see this clever homage to the JRPGs of my youth, which will hopefully release sometime this year. For those of you who love petting animals in games, you might want to check out Neverending Beyond. You must pet creatures, or else you'll die in this roguelike. You can pet squirrels, pandas, skinks, moles, triceratops, chickens, platypi, and so much more. It'll arrive in Q4 of 2024. In terms of strange games, Building Relationships is a game made for those with a taste for the bizarre. In it, you're literally a building, and your goal is to build relationships with other buildings on an island where other bachelor pads meet. You can dash, jump, and fish, like any good RPG as well. If you're a fan of unique experiences, you should add this to your wishlist to be notified when the game actually releases. Fans of platformers like Cuphead should check out Fantasy Boy, a 2D hand-drawn game about a young man named Boy who must save a kidnapped princess. While it doesn't feature the bullet-shooting, fast-paced action of Cuphead, Fantasy Boy looks like a good time for folks who like to stab at big cartoony bosses. It'll be coming soon, so keep an eye out for it. The Warrior is up next, and the only thing I can compare it to is the 2014 classic game Nidhogg, but only tangentially. In The Warrior, you start off as the titular warrior, a small man with a very big sword, who must platform and puzzle his way through a sparse dungeon. But then, the worm comes to devour the warrior, and the worm becomes your controlled character. Eventually, you gain control of the king, and then the demon, and each character has a unique control scheme or an ability to make navigation and puzzle solving complex and interesting. If you like puzzle platformers, look for The Warrior this year. For folks who like bump slash games like Ease, you should check out Angeline Era, a game set in an Irish mythology-inspired world with battles, puzzles, farming, and cooking. I find bump-based combat rare these days, and it presents a unique sort of problem to solve when it comes to cornering enemies without being overwhelmed by their numbers. It also looks like there's a throwback to Dragon Quest I style first-person dungeon exploration in this, perhaps in a minigame. So Angeline Era seems like a feast for nostalgic gamers. It releases in 2025. When I was researching these games, I discovered that some of the same folks who are working on My Familiar, that game I talked about a little while ago, are also developing Quartet, a straight-up Final Fantasy-style RPG. In it, you can fight huge bosses, manage your team of 8 heroes, and follow 4 crafted stories that follow in the wake of a centuries-old mystery. This one looks gorgeous, so if you're a die-hard RPG fan, look for Quartet in 2024. The folks who developed Yuppie Psycho are back at it again with another fascinating pixelated story called Catechesis. In it, an altar boy who works very hard to be good gets possessed by a demon. All his good deeds then start to open a gateway to hell, so he must continue his virtuous pursuit during the day and slay monsters by night to prevent the apocalypse. If you like twin-stick fighting, stealthing around monsters, and cool religious lore, you might like Catechesis. Next up, a game you can play right now if you'd like. Crab God is an atmospheric strategy game, which reminds me a little bit of one of my favorite childhood games, Sim Ant. In Crab God, you guide your crablings by picking pursuits for them, like gardener, scavenger, worshipper, builder, and hunter. Then you watch as they develop the ecosystem of the coral reef and build your crabby kingdom to new heights. Most important of all, as you play Crab God, you can make decisions that have real-world benefits to real sea turtles, reefs, and carbon offsetting. So check out this now on Steam. On a less philanthropic note, there's Pain to Win, which I can best describe as Hotline Miami, but with clowns. Pain to Win is brutal, not just in its rendering of gory close encounter combat, but in that your character is painfully mortal, and thus you will die over and over again. A standard, wholesome, cozy game, this is not, but I think that fans of the genre will slip into Pain to Win like a well-loved hoodie. It's apparently coming soon, so grab your clown wig and wishlist this game to be the first to know exactly when it comes out. On the cuter side of things, Rooster is a game inspired by the Chinese zodiac, where the gameplay actually changes depending on which Chinese zodiac character you're interacting with. Rooster, the bawdy house guest, whose antics get them thrown out of a party, must now make amends with the friends he has disappointed or risk being stuck in the ancient past. This game features hidden object levels, puzzles, a dating sim, cooking minigames, garden design, tower defense, and more. It looks like a lovely game with lots of cultural insight, so look forward to it in early 2025. Squeakross is another cute game featuring animals. Rodents, of course. Squeakross is a Picross-like game where the final image you design becomes a piece of furniture in a creature's house. There's no time limit to the puzzles, and there's even a hint system and logic assist system for folks who are new to the genre or just struggling on one segment. This looks like a friendly but still challenging puzzle game, so give it a try when it comes out in 2025. If you love Stardew Valley, but you wish there was a little more conflict, you might like Vampire Rancher, where you, a vampire, harvest both crops and humans. You're trying to put your sleepy western town back on the map, but that requires industry, so you need to start attracting visitors to your saloons and shops. The problem is these visitors are also very tasty, so you need to balance serving customers and serving them for dinner. This game is coming soon, so if you want to switch things up with your farming sims, check it out this year. Also, if you're looking for more non-cozy Stardew Valley clones, keep an eye out for Grave Seasons by Perfect Garbage, which is currently in development. More on that later. Great God Grove is a game that is absolutely dripping with style in 2D, 3D, and even puppetry. In this puzzle adventure game, you're a human trying to solve the problems of gods by sucking up dialogue boxes and blasting them at people. Is someone sleeping in a doorway blocking your passage? Suck up the dialogue of someone telling you to open your eyes and blast it back at the snoozing doorman. This game looks bizarre and stylish, so look for Great God Grove on Steam if you want something different to play this year. If you enjoy hidden object adventures, Lost and Found Co. has a lot going on in its cute and cozy world. Wizards turning each other into frogs, tigers bursting into a tea house, a foxy dancer strutting their stuff on a grand piano, and more are waiting somewhere in the hubbub for you to find. The story looks precious as well, with you building your business and helping out a dragon to regain her lost powers. This one is coming out sometime this year, so keep a keen eye out for it. Devolver had a handful of announcements this year as well, starting off with the Cult of the Lamb co-op, starring second player Goat, which launched August 12th. If you've been having a hard time taking down bosses, or you just want to be able to go fishing with a friend, you can now get even more out of the 2022 indie hit by tagging in a goat buddy. There's one more announcement from the Devolver Showcase that I wanted to cover, and that is Crush House, developed by Nicole He in collaboration with Nariel, who you might remember developed Card Shark, one of the games I've covered on this podcast. Crush House embodies the intensity and absurdity of reality love drama shows. It's a life sim and a dating sim with a mystery twist. Something terrible lurks in the production department basement, and you're forbidden from warning the cast about it. Crush House launched August 9th, so if you love drama, you better check it out. Let's take a break from all these great indie game announcements and switch over to some of the double and AAA news from the Xbox Showcase. First off, South of Midnight had the biggest splash, in my opinion, of any of the major showcases. It's a southern gothic tale full of magic and big characters. I love the main character, Hazel. I feel like her personality shines through her conversations with the creatures of the swamp, like the great big catfish that gives her a ride through the bayou, and doesn't lean too heavily into the quippiness that trips up a lot of main characters these days, that makes them feel less like a person and more like a writer's room full of people trying to one-up each other. Hazel feels real. I also appreciate the art style that they've gone with, rendering Hazel proportionately without having to render her perfectly realistically. There's kind of a painterliness to the world and Hazel and the foes that she faces along the way, and I think the game's low frame rate adds a kind of storybook quality that makes South of Midnight feel like a tall tale brought to life. I'm excited for this to come out in 2025. Also announced at the Xbox Showcase was Winter Burrow, a precious crafting and exploring game where you, a city mouse, return to your childhood stump home to find it in ruin. It has beautiful hand-drawn graphics that look like something out of an old children's book. If you're a Stardew Valley fan, I think you'll want to look for this one next year. Another game which caught my eye the second the developer's logo dropped was Mixtape, developed by Beethoven and Dinosaur, the same folks who made The Artful Escape, which I covered in the podcast a little while back. Like South of Midnight, Mixtape employs the artistic use of low frame rate in order to make their protagonists stand out against the forested landscapes of a sleepy suburb. And, true to its name, Mixtape soundtrack will be a mix of popular nostalgic tunes from the time period that it's set in, including music by Devo, The Smashing Pumpkins, Iggy Pop, Joy Division, and more. It'll be out sometime in 2025, so if you're craving a coming-of-age story with a cool soundtrack, keep an eye and an ear out for Mixtape. Last but not least of the announcements from the Xbox Showcase, there's a direct sequel coming for the original Life is Strange called Life is Strange Double Exposure. In it, Max Caulfield is back, and she's got to investigate two realities with her powers. One where her friend has been murdered, and one where she yet lives. I haven't played Life is Strange myself, but even I'm intrigued by Deck 9's move to return to their original protagonist after making so many other games in the series that pulled away from her. Fans of the franchise can play this new adventure on October 29th, 2024. And guess what? There's even more game showcases to go through. Here are a few of my favorite announcements from the Latin American showcase. First up, Among the Stars, an ecologically minded platformer where you have to protect the Brazilian rainforest. The gameplay of Among the Stars looks a little like the indie hit Child of Light, with 2D platforming elements and moments of turn-based combat. The young protagonist is aided on her journey by a star-filled wolf who merges with her, becoming spectral ears and a tail that grant her magical powers as she tries to stop the fires and forces behind them from destroying her land. The trailer for this game has big Studio Ghibli vibes, and I hope the scenes shown are actual cutscenes from the game. There's no release date set yet for Among the Stars, but if you're interested, there's a link to the game's development Discord in the description of the trailer, which I've linked in the description of this episode. Next up is Sopa, the Tale of the Stolen Potato, which I feel like I've seen in a Wholesome Direct a little while back. It stars a boy whose grandma asked for a potato for the soup that she was making, but the potato is stolen by strange, Muppet-like creatures. Following the stolen potato takes the young hero on a magical adventure brimming with personality. This one looks to be rich with culture and also wisdom, as it tells the story of the traditions we pass on. Sopa, Tale of the Stolen Potato comes out sometime this year, so I hope you're hungry. You've had your potatoes, now get ready for some cabbage. The Cabbage effect, that is. It's a bizarre twin-stick shooter with a mixed media art style. Environments and characters are a mix of glossy 3D models, voxel buildings, collages of photorealistic cutouts, pixel art NPCs, and hand-drawn cartoonish characters. The plot of the game is slightly more grounded, with strange extraterrestrial beings invading Earth, and your protagonists being the only line of defense. If you're into weird stuff, give The Cabbage Effect a look on Steam and maybe add it to your wishlist. Last but not least for the Latin American Game Showcase, I loved the preview they gave of Mariachi Legends. It's a stylish 2D action platformer with some really visceral fights a la Blasphemous or Last Faith, but has its own unique flavor inspired by Mexican history and culture. They also pull from Mexican cuisine for a cooking minigame, and the game seems heavily influenced by tarot, so the game's got a little bit of something for everybody. It's live on Kickstarter, so if you're a Metroidvania fan, give it a look. Okay, 2 more showcases to go. You've really stuck it out. I'm proud of you. Let's talk about my favorite announcements from the Women-Led Game Showcase, starting off with Dungeon Clawler. It's a little like the indie hit Backpack Hero, where at the bottom of your screen your character is battling it out with enemies, but rather than have to manage what loot you're bringing with you in your backpack, in Dungeon Clawler, you're operating a claw machine to drop prizes on your hero. It's a roguelike, so the power-ups you get, the enemies you face, and the maps you explore will be randomized, and your progress is incremental but satisfying. Keep an eye out for its release near the end of this year. Another woman-led game is Duck Detective, which is exactly what it sounds like on the tin. As the Duck Detective, you're looking into the case of the stolen salami from the workplace fridge. Who snatched that sausage? You must closely examine the witnesses and culprits with your magnifying glass to see what secrets they're hiding and use the clue words you discover to fill in the blanks on the narrative that you're developing. It's full of cute and cartoony animals, so if you like lighthearted mysteries, check out Duck Detective. It's already out. Okay, last showcase, and this one's the big one. Summer Games Fest, hosted by Jeff Keighley. There's only 3 big announcements from this showcase that didn't overlap anywhere else, so let's see what's coming up in terms of bigger games. In a surprising turn, Capcom announced that the upcoming DLC fighters for Street Fighter VI include Fatal Fury characters Terry Bogard and Mai. This isn't the first time that Terry has set foot outside of the King of Fighters and Fatal Fury. Bogart has appeared in several SNK vs. Capcom games, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and even Fall Guys. Shiranui Mai also usually appears alongside of Bogart in SNK vs. Capcom games, but has also appeared in the strategy RPG Queen's Gate Spiral Chaos, and of course, a few iterations of the Dead or Alive franchise. The powerful duo will be joined by the infamous Street Fighter series villain M. Bison, as well as the kind-hearted capoeira fighter Elena. The DLC characters will be released over the next year, dropping once per season. If you'd like to learn more, you can check out Michael Higham's article over at IGN, which I've linked in this episode's description. Next up, Blumhouse, the studio responsible for Megan, the film about the little android girl, and the Five Nights at Freddy's movies, has announced a slew of games. Surprisingly, the games announced are not based on existing intellectual properties, but new stories like Sleep Awake, Fear the Spotlight, Chrysalis, Theater of Idols, The Simulation, Project C, and Grave Seasons. Yes, the same game I had mentioned earlier in regards to Stardew Valley likes that have a darker side. The goal of Blumhouse's gaming ventures, as stated by the founder and CEO Jason Blum, is to take original low-budget ideas and bring them to life. I love their selection of indie work so far, though I'm not sure if they have any hands in the development of these stories, or if they're more so just funding and publishing the works. Either way, I'm excited to see what they come out with. If you'd like to read up on their upcoming projects, check out Taylor Lyles and Alex Stedman's article over at IGN, which I've linked in the description. Last, in terms of gaming news, Innersloth, the developers of Among Us, have announced Outersloth, their publishing house for indie developers. Their upcoming roster includes Project Dosa from the developers of Thirsty Suitors, Rogue Eclipse, a space fighting roguelike, One Button Bosses, a simplified shoot-'em-up with boss fighters and roguelike levels, and Battlesuit Aces, a card-based RPG. It's good to see the folks at Inner, now Outer, Sloth throwing down a ladder for fellow indie developers who might just have the next big hit. I'll link Wesley Yin-Pool's article from IGN for more information for those of you who are curious. That's not all for the Among Us devs, though. They've also announced an animated series done by Titmouse, the studio behind Star Trek Lower Decks and Big Mouth, and written by Infinity Train and regular show writer Owen Dennis. The cast will include Patton Oswalt, Deborah Wilson, Phil Lamar, Wayne Knight, Elijah Wood, Ashley Johnson, Randall Park, and Yvette Nicole Brown, among others. This star-studded series will be coming to CBS, though there's no schedule for release at the moment. Once again, Taylor Lyles has the full story, so check it out on IGN, which I've linked in the description. Last episode I asked, what's your favorite puzzle game? Or do you have a strong memory from a puzzle in a different game genre that stuck out as your favorite? Here are your answers. Starting off, Majin Sean on Discord replied, probably a franchise for me. I loved the Professor Layton series. Thank you for that, Majin Sean. I played the heck out of the Professor Layton games as a kid. I absolutely loved them. The puzzles were clever, the hint system was balanced, and the narrative was enthralling. The Layton series also reworked a lot of classic riddles and puzzles, like the one about the sheep, the wolf, and the grain sacks crossing over the river. But for me, this was my first time encountering logic puzzles, so everything was brand new and extra challenging. And in terms of narrative, there was a lot of twists I didn't see coming in those games, so the story kept me on edge of my seat. I think between Professor Layton and the Phoenix Wright series, I developed a love of deduction as a kid that has only grown stronger as I get older. So thank you for that, Majin-chan, for reminding me of Professor Layton. Noah Mash responded, "My favorite is almost certainly Portal. I think I played that game back to back about 4 times in a row. However, I have an alternative choice. My first puzzle game was Chip's Challenge, which came with the ZX Spectrum. Sorry. Oh, and shout out to Zachtronics. My favorite is probably Exapunks because those games are lots of fun for nerds," says Noah Mash. Thank you for that, Mash. I wish I could play Portal myself. Curse my brain for not liking first-person games. Portal was a huge meme when I stepped back into the gaming world after taking a break for college and grad school, so I absorbed most of Portal 1 and Portal 2 through just the general consciousness. It also looks like Chip's Challenge is something I ostensibly could play, an item collection, block pushing labyrinth kind of game. It looks like it would have been a real time sink for my brother and I when we were kids, especially since there's almost 150 levels of Chip's Challenge. If you're nostalgic for this game, it turns out it's on Steam, so see how far you can get with your adult brain now, I guess? Or you can check out a playthrough on YouTube, which is what I did. And Exapunks looks very interesting, Mash. A more recent game than Chip's Challenge, for sure, that involves hacking various things, from hacking a game, to hacking a university, to hacking your own body. It looks like it might be a little tough for me, though. I couldn't even get far into Baba Is You, another kind of coding-centric game, but for folks with a technological inclination, this looks like fun. So thank you for that, Mash. Chain Snake on Discord wrote, "If we're talking puzzle-focused games in general, I have to give it to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The way they give you absolute freedom in most cases to solve puzzles, to the point that sometimes you can't tell whether your solution was intended or not, or maybe even a bug, while still leaving you feeling accomplished every time, is lightning in a bottle that you'd be surprised to see again in our lifetime. There's just something special to me about the way they pulled off the 'you're in this situation, here are your materials, good luck' type of puzzle room, without having any sort of feeling that you're playing charades with the devs to figure out what they want out of this situation." Thank you for that, Snake. I actually forgot for a moment how puzzle-based that Zelda games are, but Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom really do continue Zelda's lineage of puzzle solving that started all the way back at the original Legend of Zelda, where you had to go out and burn bushes, bomb walls, and push blocks to navigate the world around you. I think you're right in thinking that Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild elevate puzzles by allowing for player ingenuity, allowing you to solve a shrine by whatever means you can imagine, as long as you use the tools and skills provided. I feel like there were so many times when I was playing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom when I would solve a puzzle on stream, when I'm playing games on stream, and somebody in the community would be like, "Wow, that's not how I did that. I can't believe that worked," you know? I think that's a testament to the strength of the engine, that despite different approaches and even some wacky physics, you can still solve a puzzle a bunch of different ways without breaking the game. So thank you for that, Snake. And Snake also added on saying, "Also, I'd like to shout out the Silent Hill series." Yes, I'm sure you saw this coming, Tina. For the sheer variety and depth of their puzzles. From the excellent riddle-based piano puzzle in Silent Hill 1 and the coin puzzle in 2, with 4 different riddles depending on the difficulty you've selected in 2's case, to the rare logical puzzles that actually make sense, like prying open a stuck desk drawer with a screwdriver, or finding and combining a hook and a piece of string to grab a set of keys that have fallen down a drain. That is smart. The games do a great job of testing every aspect of a player's problem-solving skills. Then you have some puzzles with sort of subtle hints to the world or the main character's state of mind. Like when you have to lift a trapdoor by attaching a horseshoe to it with melted wax to make a handle, which on the surface seems like a logical puzzle until you think, how is this wax able to lift a steel trapdoor? And the slight ridiculous of it adds to the feeling and the fact that the trapdoor and the entire area doesn't actually exist. Then you have Silent Hill 3's library puzzle, which, while is not particularly special on easy or medium difficulty, Hard requires you to have extensive knowledge of Shakespeare's anthology going into it. It's like the ultimate FU to everyone who insists on going into every game on the hardest difficulty with no external resources. Literally just, oh, you want to play, genius? Okay, go get a master's in Shakespeare then, and then come talk to me. It's absolutely absurd, and I love it. And again, that's from Chainsnake. It sounds like the Silent Hill franchise has a lot of excellent puzzles. I wonder if horror franchises like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, with their cryptic puzzle kind of gameplay, influence creators of escape rooms. When you think of it, Silent Hill and Resident Evil are just escape rooms with haunted house monsters shambling around them, with the extra pressure to solve a puzzle to get to safety. I do wonder about that trapdoor horseshoe situation, though, Snake. It raises the question, does a puzzle have to be believable to be satisfying or good? Does it have to make sense to work? Sometimes it's hard to buy into a game when the rules don't quite make sense. But, love this answer. Thank you so much, Snake, for it. Larry Kenobi said on Discord, I don't do many puzzle games, but I would say that Portal would be my favorite too, especially the community-made Portal Reloaded. It adds to the gameplay by allowing you to shoot a third portal where you can skip between the present and the future. It really adds another level to the game. For example, a door is blocked in the present, but if you go to the future, it isn't. Thank you for that, Larry. I love that the community of Portal is so devoted, they're making puzzles themselves in the game's engine. And I think that the third dimension time is a great spin to put on things. I actually was just talking to my brother about other cool time puzzle games, and he suggested The Return of the Obra Dinn, which I have to play now, because also playing The Case of the Golden Idol, which I'll talk about later, everyone was like, you should try Obra Dinn. So I'm going to have to. In other games that involve time as a puzzle element, there's Dark Dreams Don't Die, Forgotten City, which you might remember came out a little while ago. I believe that was the one based on the Skyrim mod. Outer Wilds, so cool, time loop, you know. Day of the Tentacle, losing track. Ghost Trick, which I played recently on the stream, and Braid. I love time traveling mechanics, so I feel like I'm really missing out on Portal's community levels, but I can't play it because it's first person. Anyway, thank you, Larry, for the suggestion. I appreciate that. And last but not least, Celadors on Discord wrote, definitely old school adventure games, especially the LucasArts ones. Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, Sam & Max, Full Throttle. Currently, Celadors is playing through Grim Fandango and has a special mention to all the Sierra Quest games, especially Space Quest 4 and King's Quest 3. Back when YouTube was relatively young, Celadors, my brother and I would watch folks play King's Quest and Space Quest. We didn't have those games growing up, so it was a novelty to watch somebody else play through them. As an adult, I am really loving point-and-click adventures, and someday I hope to play through classics like Monkey Island and Grim Fandango as well. It's amazing how much effort goes into crafting a satisfying adventure with puzzles as the main focus. I think the games you mentioned are classics for a reason, Celadors. So thank you for that. And thank you all so much for the answers to this episode's question and for all your answers to episodes past. I'm so glad we could have these enlightening conversations about the games that we love. Now, onto the review, which I will warn you does contain some spoilers because I can't talk about this game without gushing about it. The Case of the Golden Idol is a detective game developed by Color Grade Games and published by PlayStack on October 13th, 2022. In it, you follow this haunting and magical artifact, the Golden Idol, of course, through time as it passes through the hands of some very dangerous men. The game begins with a murder. Albert Cloudsley kills his expedition partner, Oberon Geller, whose idol he covets. And the bloody trail continues through the game as the characters learn more and more about the idol's capabilities. Sebastian Cloudsley, Albert's descendant, discovers that the idol has the ability to cause spontaneous combustion. When the idol passes into the more capable and dangerous hands of his brother, the ambitious politician Edmund Cloudsley, its true functions come to light. It can increase and decrease all sorts of things, from heat and cold to the alchemical makeup of things to even the years of life that one possesses, allowing Cloudsley to achieve a sort of immortality as long as he can steal life from others. The Case of the Golden Idol is a sublime mystery that will confound and delight you, challenging your assumptions with every twist and turn. As a detective game, The Case of the Golden Idol requires you to find clues in each scene of its chapters. Players click onto people and objects to investigate them, and sometimes those objects or people are hiding something within, such as a note on a character inviting them to dine at a residence, or a betting ticket that might suggest that they're unscrupulous with their money. Items of significance become nouns in your index of clues, but if you want proper names, actions, or even conjunctions, you have to hunt those down in the words said by characters or those that are written in notes, books, and letters. People very rarely have something on them with their personal name on it that one can click, so you have to determine who is who based on context clues. In the second scene, for instance, the philosopher Sebastian Cloudsley's name is not scrawled across his face, of course, but you discover his identity from an unfinished tract on spontaneous combustion that lies on his desk. As more people are added to the narrative, this task becomes more difficult, such as when you must ascertain who each player at the Mermaid Inn's card table is by the items on their person, the rounds of cards they've played, and the tab they've accumulated at the bar. In a way, however, the task becomes also easier when characters from previous chapters return, like Nicholas Maker, once the executor of Sebastian Cloudsley's will returns as the officiant of the cult of the Brotherhood of Masks, the secret society that stole the Golden Idol away from Edmund Cloudsley. I found myself going back and revisiting chapters to refresh myself, and that changed how I saw the narrative. A man at the inn, I realized, had named himself Ash Blair after the tobacco he was fond of smoking. But in truth, he was actually David Gorin, Edmund Cloudsley's henchman that he had sent to kill a man to steal back the Golden Idol for Cloudsley. After that little trick, I realized that the people in the Case of the Golden Idol were not as they seemed. Once you've got all your nouns, verbs, and conjunctions from the world, you're on to the hard part. It's best, in my opinion, to try to identify who is who in the room, particularly if there's characters from the previous chapters, though that might just be how my brain works. Then you can work through the chronology of events, or any peripheral information like the hierarchy of a secret society, or who sat where at a dining room table. The most difficult thing to figure out, in my opinion, is the motive of the characters. That requires the most information of all, scanning not only the evidence each person has, but the letters that are written to them or by them, the items in their possession, or the things that they should possess but were stolen, but also the fact that many characters' motivation lies in previous chapters. Because of the complexity of the Case of the Golden Idol, I highly recommend playing the game with a notebook next to you, maybe a pen as well, because you'll want to flip back to things that you figured out from the previous chapters to inform your future events. Particularly, it helped me a lot to write down the formulations for the magic that Edmund Cloudsley had discovered to parse his actions later in life. How he could kill his pursuers with an exploding vase, how he could fly miraculously, and how ultimately he achieved immortality at the expense of others. Everything boiled down to a simple sequence of symbols, and those revealed the nature of Cloudsley's nefarious plans. Each segment of the Case of the Golden Idol is surprising. At first, I was unfamiliar with the characters, so I had to kind of weasel around and brute force my way through things. Sometimes I was even plugging words in just to see if it would yield a positive result. But after the third chapter, I was familiar with the characters, and I was accustomed to their motives. I knew they had done something. I just needed to figure out how or why. Towards the end of the game, I was often saying out loud to myself, "Edmund Cloudsley, you rat, how did you do it this time?" Even with my familiarity with the characters, though, I found myself stunned, honestly, at the end of each chapter, even to the very last event. I was shocked to find out who killed who in the last scene, where the leader of the New Order attempts to march to the king's palace to wrest ultimate power away from him, but in a fit of pride, makes one glaring error. I was surprised, delighted, and satisfied all at once by the outcome. In order for a game like this to work, You need to know when you have all the information at your disposal before you start jumping to conclusions. So I appreciate the fact that the Case of the Golden Idol tells you when you found every piece of information in a level. But I also appreciate the fact that it gives you a lot of redundant or useless information. You won't need the name of every single weapon on a scene, everything everybody has in hand, just the weapon that struck the killing blow. But if you only found the weapon that struck the killing blow, then that piece of the mystery would be too easy to suss out. I also appreciate the game's hint feature. It's a little mini game where you work for a hint and the game asks you first to reframe your thought process. You need to properly identify the name of people, like Rose Cuthbert, Cloudsley's sister, or properly label an ink pot in 3 rows of 5 items. Then you can choose from a number of labeled boxes containing clues to parts from that scene's mystery. For example, during the scene at the inn where card players sit around the table on one floor and a man lies dead in a pool of his own blood in a locked room on the 2nd floor, you can access hints for 4 things: the means of access to the locked room, the card matches, the motive, and the bloody writing scrawled on the wall of the victim's room. The game will never tell you the exact answer, however, only asking you clarifying questions regarding the subject. To use the in-levels hints again, if you look into the box labeled on the motive, the game says, "One small question, dear friend. More than one subject might have a plausible motive to dislike the victim, but a motive does not a killer make. Focus on who had the means to do the deed rather than who merely wished for it." I gotta say, at the time, this hint really frustrated me. I was sure that the murderer was the man outside the inn, an escaped convict by the name of Robert Redruth, who I had thought broke through a window and snuck out. He even had a note on him telling him where to go after making the kill. But Redruth didn't have a motive. He had no reason to kill Willard Wright, the cultist who had inherited the Golden Idol from the Secret Society brother, Sebastian Cloudsley. No, the murderer had to be somebody who wanted what Wright had, and that was what Ash Blair, who I had only pieced together many chapters later, was actually David Gorin, the henchman of Edmund Cloudsley. I came to my answer by brute forcing the puzzle at the time and ignoring the hints, which didn't seem to make sense to me. But looking back on it, the hint was perfect for the job. That case caused me to rethink my approach to the game, and I think that's the perfect mark of a mystery game. Something that challenges the way you think, not by contrivances, but by undermining your assumptions. The killer should never be your first assumption. The murder weapon should never be your first guess, and the motive should never be happenstance. The Case of the Golden Idol, in my opinion, is flawless. It combines excellent gameplay with a thrilling narrative. It's really enthralling the way that you follow this hateful and cunning man's events. I was never rooting for Edmund Cloudsley, but I was obsessed with following his steps. Often, when I don't like a character, I really bounce off of a game. Sometimes protagonists can be annoying, chirpy, or unrelatable. Edmund Cloudsley might be the worst kind of person, the kind that takes qualities like brilliance, charisma, and ingenuity and wields them as weapons. But despite him being an awful man, I had to see what he would do next. How would he figure out reverse aging? Would he get his idol back? What lengths would he go to get what he wants? My curiosity drove me forwards, while I was pleased with the satisfying snap of each correct word falling into place in the puzzle that explains each scene's events. And I'd like to talk about the art style, too, of The Case of the Golden Idol for a moment. I heard a lot of comments when I was playing this game on Twitch that the art style was weird. And yes, it is weird. It's weird and unique. The characters are a little grotesque, but there's a realism to them that I appreciate. It reminds me of the idea of portraiture from that time period. Artists were hired to aggrandize their subjects, to efface their molds and their splotches, to make them seem like paragons of moral and political ideals. But in truth, those people in those paintings were humans, warts and all, and often fell short of the heroes that they were painted to be. The Case of the Golden Idol captures every ugly detail about each person. I don't think there's a single character in the game who's objectively beautiful, even those who are lusted after. Even Mary Richards, the woman whom both Edmund Cloudsley and his gambling nephew, Peter Batley, are in love with, even she is the caricature of a woman, seeming to swoon under the weight of her immense hair, and in possession of a mole that would certainly be erased in a classically rendered portrait of her. Most of the characters in the case of the Golden Idol are committing ugly acts, big and small, stealing from one another, gambling their fortunes away, jockeying for power, and vying for each other's attentions. That their shock, horror, smugness, and depravity are writ plain across their faces is really satisfying to me, and in their grim expressions lies the truth of their actions. Without such emotive and contorted expressions, I feel like their motives and wrongdoings would be that much harder to parse. I really appreciate Admiral KOOK, Peter Batley, and David Gorin particularly for that. KOOK is always bugging out. He's a brutal and violent man who acts like an animal, murdering his competition. Batley is just one lucky break from being able to pay off his debts, and one bad day away from killing a man with any means necessary, be it a fork from a dinner plate or something with a bigger bang. And uniquely, I think David Gorin's expression hardly changes from the cold, professional calculation that is splayed across his face, except when he's knocked unconscious. Another perfect element of the case of the Golden Idol, in my opinion, is the soundtrack. It's banger after banger of intense thinking music. Kyle Misko is the musician behind the soundtrack, and his songs of the game are eerie and ambient, making them the perfect backdrop for puzzle solving. There's an underlying tension in each song that matches the dark deeds committed in every chapter. One of my favorite tracks is a very early one, called Alone and Dead. It feels exactly like the strange room we find ourselves in, sinister, like there's something lurking just at your periphery. In this room, Sebastian Cloudsley, a man who we've never seen, lies dead in his bed, a huge gash on his head. There are several clues in this room that only become relevant later. There's a mask that hangs over Sebastian's bed, and it indicates his status in the Brotherhood of Masks, as does the red ring on his hand. And of course, there's the most sinister and mysterious object in his room, the golden idol on a pedestal in the dark corner, which has been seen in the chapter before. There are plenty of points in each track that allow for your thoughts to gather, for you to piece together the puzzle. I appreciate the soundtrack for being so easy to listen to, but also easy to just let fall to the background so your thoughts on the case can take the foreground. Each track is also very character forward, fleshing out the scene and making it practically its own character, while also not being so disruptive that it derails your train of thought. Misko also makes excellent use of period-appropriate instruments in the soundtrack. For the scene, The Intoxicating Dinner Party in Chapter 2, Misko masterfully uses the harpsichord to create a Baroque backdrop for the politically charged feast. Then the plucked string instruments enter to suggest the trailing footsteps, the behind-the-scenes machinations of agents that are just below Edmund Cloudsley's nose, but out of his sight, attempting to orchestrate his death. Yet there's a feeling of control in the song that, though it wavers and recedes at times, doesn't fade. It suggests that Cloudsley remains in control. Misko also uses warping to draw attention to the strange, mystical, and deranged things that are happening, such as the warping of the traditional Irish songs used in the Lighthouse chapter. In this scene, the new leader of the Brotherhood of Masks is crowned, and the members rejoice at the heels of Lazarus Hurst, their new leader. The traditional ditty is light, but it begins to unravel as the scene comes to light. The previous griffin lies dead at the foot of the lighthouse from whence he fell, and power now rests with the man who is not who he seems. The song bends to his will, just as he will bend the world to meet his ambitions. In all, The Case of the Golden Idol is one of my favorite games of all time now. I love mysteries and puzzles, and this is perhaps the best iteration of the concept that I have ever seen. It makes me want to play more mysteries like The Return of the Obra Dinn. And more than that, it has made me so excited for the game's sequel, The Rise of the Golden Idol, which is set to release this year. The Case of the Golden Idol is a game I would recommend to point and click fans, mystery fans, and also fans of historical dramas. Even though it's not based totally in fact, The Case of the Golden Idol does a great job of enmeshing itself in the period. It's a game that'll appeal to people who like a challenge, who like recognizing patterns, and who get a real thrill from being right. Please check it out. There are so many cool mysteries to unfold that even if you comb over every detail I have laid out in this review, you won't even have gotten a tenth of the story. That is all I have for you today. There might be more news and reviews in the future, but for now, I am tucking this podcast in to rest for a long time. I'm preoccupied right now taking care of my family as my father fights cancer, so I don't have a lot of time left to write this podcast, record it, edit it, and upload it. I hope there will come a time in the future where I can return to this podcast in some shape or form, but I want to thank you all so much for listening to the show and supporting me along the way. I also want to thank Puddles of Infinity for the use of their song Porches and Universes, and Titsay for the beautiful album art. And even though our time together is coming to an end, you can always find your way back here, my world-worn weary friend. There's a spot here in the clearing, in the quietude and shade, for you to rest a while and listen to Games in the Glade. Goodbye.